This tracking system is responsible for over $1 million in sales in the info space. And in this video, I'm going to break everything down because the reason why it's so effective and the reason it's actually been able to make us more money is because we are able to see exactly where every single call is being booked from, all the different stats for the setters, the closers, everything in terms of our organic content, the ads that we're running, the landing page conversions, every single metric that you can think of. And then we also use this to keep track of every single lead, who needs to be followed up with, who's on payment plans, do we have any upcoming payments that we need to be aware of. And then we also have automations on the back end to tie everything together so that we get notified every single time something happens. So this is all automated and I'm going to show you everything so you can implement this yourself, because if you have a solid tracking system in place, it's going to be able to make you a lot of money because you know exactly what you need to focus on to be able to scale even further. Now, a few of these results just to show you, it's around $1 million that we've done collectively for the clients that we've worked with. So for example, with this client, we did a little under 150K in I think this was 130 days. This comes down to 130 days, something like that. We've done some 50K months for some of our clients. Over here, 43K. You know, I'm not going to go into all of these, but you can also check these out on my page. 9.5K in 24 hours, 8.5K in 24 hours, 22K a week, 6K a day, yada, 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 just to show you kind of a little bit of proof. But we did actually do the math and it comes out to around 1 million collectively, taking all the payments, into account. Now, another thing to note is that we usually have a very, very good show rate. I don't think we've ever dipped below maybe 75% show rate. Usually it's in the 80s or 90s, depending on the offer and the ICP and stuff like that. And then we usually also have a very good close rate. Now, this is also comes down to the tracking, right? Because we're able to see all the different numbers on a day by day, week by week, month by month, whatever basis, to be able to optimize every single thing. And we can implement systems quickly to, for example, fix the show rate if it's low. And if you don't have the correct tracking in place, then it becomes very difficult to do so. Now, the way that this works is every single time we book a call, if we get a payment, Stripe, WAP, Fanbases, whatever, and every single time we have any end of day reports or sales call reports, so the closers fill out after a sales call, setters fill out at the end of the day, or whatever, anything that comes through, or even opt-ins, anything, it automatically gets sent to the tracking sheet, to our CRM, and then to the Discord, which is where we get notified. And keep in mind, I'm not going to go into every single automation and how they're set up, because that would be a very, very long video. But if you want the entire automations sheet, you can just DM me on IG and I'll send you this. This is like templatized, all of the different automations, or most of the automations. Now, the first thing, like I said, is the tracking sheet. And this is I would say, like, you can argue all of these are obviously important. You need the CRM, you need, everything, but this is where you get the specific numbers. So as you can see, we can filter by the dates. So we can have specific dates. It can be 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, whatever you want to do, a year. And then off the bat, we're going to see all of the recorded payments. So this is, again, just like a test sheet that I took some screenshots of. But however much you have totally made, it would show up in here, right? So for example, last week, if you had a 20K week, it would say 20K over here. Then we have upcoming payments. This is extremely helpful if you have people on payment plans, or if you have people in general that you just need to follow up with because they owe you money. As the sales teams put in, or as your sales team put in a new close, or even if you did it, if you say this guy has a payment upcoming on, let's say, a month from now, when you're 1 week away, he's going to show up in here. So this is all the payments that are due within the next 7 days are going to show up in here. So you know exactly, okay, Lewis on May 1st owes us 2K. So if he's not on a recurring, automatic payment, then we need to get this guy, we need to basically engage this guy and get the payments, This is very helpful because a lot of times if you have a lot of people on payment plans, it can become kind of messy. So this is automatically going to show you exactly when people need to pay. Next up is the sales tab. This is, arguably one of the most important things that you need to track. And we can track every single thing based off call type. So is it a follow-up call? Is it a sales call, like the first call? We can track by UTM source. What this means is we have a custom tracking code on every single booked call link that we send out. We have one for the Instagram bio, one for the specific setter, so we can track who was the setter that booked this guy in. And you can also make them specifically for each individual YouTube video that you make. So you know exactly who came from exactly which YouTube video and everything like that. So again, you can track your attributed revenue towards how much did YouTube make me, how much did this specific YouTube video make me, how much did this setter make me, how much did I make on YouTube versus Instagram versus whatever, and you can track everything very, very cleanly. And this is gonna, as you put these in, it's gonna automatically populate all the numbers based off of that. Total revenue, total cash collected, average deal size, average cash on call. This is also very important to see kind of what do you averagely cash collect on the call. You obviously want this to be as high as possible. Close rate, show rate, PIF rate. So how many of the clients that you close do you actually end up getting a PIF from? Cash collected, right? So like how much you cash collect on the call basically on average, right? So this in this case would be 41%. Now you obviously want this to be as high as possible, ideally over 50%. So you cash collect at least 50% of the money that you sell the package for upfront. No show rate, cancel, and then we track every single detail in terms of like how many calls booked, how many live calls, no shows, canceled or rescheduled, booked for follow-ups, everything. So when you have this in place, you're able to track not only the close rate for the closer, because you're gonna obviously filter by the closer, but you're also able to filter by the setter. As you can see, we can filter by the setter, and all of these numbers would update in terms of who was the setter and what is the specific close rate for this setter versus that setter. Because a lot of times, if you are tracking your sales, like your sales stats based off of the closer, you might not know what's the sales stats of the setter, right? You might want to see what's the close rate on YouTube versus IG, what's the close rate on the leads that setter 1 is booking in versus setter 2. Right? So yes, you want to understand your different closers, but you also want to understand where are the calls being coming from and what's the close rate on the different sources that these leads are being booked in from, because you might have an extreme difference from one setter to the next in terms of close rate, even though they might book the same amount of calls. So if you're not tracking this, you might get flawed information where you think the setter is doing very, very good because he's booking calls, but if you actually knew that none of these are actually closing. Right, the next thing is setting. We go very deep in terms of how we are tracking the setting in the DMs, or even on phones, right? So for opt-in leads, because you want to be able to understand not just the overall specific, which would be like, the average calls that we're booking per day, or average appointment booking rate, but you also want to be able to understand what's the reply rate, reply to qualified convo to pitch, because when you have these stats underneath, you're able to understand what specifically in the conversation needs to be worked on, right? Again, this is a dummy sheet, so these numbers are not correct, but you can see booked calls per day. You can again filter by who was the setter that filled out the end of day report, and this is automated, right? So every single time that the setter fills out the end of day report, these numbers are going to be updated. You can also filter by DM or phone settings. So was this done on phone or the DM? So you don't have to have different sheets for DM and phone. It's in the same sheet. Because it's the same process essentially, right? Like if you're going through a DM conversation versus a phone conversation, it's pretty much the same thing. And then you can see all the different numbers that the setters have done, right? So you can make sure that they are on KPI every single day. The next thing is the organic. This is something that we recently started to track, but you want to be able to track if you're doing a lot of content, what's the actual, what is the outcome of the content that we are posting, right? In terms of followers that we're getting and the ICP followers that we're getting. And also how many of the followers that you're getting are ICP clients, or are within your target avatar essentially. And then how many of those are you getting per day? Because this is going to give you a very good understanding of how good your organic is performing. And you would just get your setter again to fill this out every single day. Also, if you're running profile ads, you would have your setter fill this in as well. You would just see, how many followers am I getting? How many of those are ICP, cost per inbound DM, ad spend, booked calls, cost per booked call. So you would be able to calculate the ROAS and everything based off of the ads, right? And again, if you booked somebody in from ads, you would just have a UTM source and give that to the setter and be like, yo, if you're booking anybody in from ads, use this link, and you would tag with the code, for example, Instagram ads, campaign 1. And then you would be able to attribute campaign 1 revenue for everybody that he books in from that campaign, right? So if you booked somebody in from campaign 1, campaign 2, whatever, you would be able to see that in the UTM source because you would just make a new code on each individual Calendly link. It's UTM source. You can just look it up on Google. You can make a link. You can make it. You can make the code be whatever you want to be. And then every single time you're booking a call, that code is going to show up in Calendly, and then you can automate that to show up in your tracking sheets and give you notifications and everything on Discord, which we're going to go into later. You can obviously also do this if you're running VSL ads, if you're running webinar ads, like whatever you want to do. This is also why it's built on Google Sheets, because you might have seen Looker Studio, you might have seen Airtable. The problem with Airtable, so let's go through the issues, right? Like Looker Studio has the issue where if you change anything within the sheet, the entire dashboard of Looker Studio is going to change as well. Whereas if you do this inside of Google Sheet, the links are, or like the formula is set in stone. So if you change anything, the formula is going to change with it. That's the issue that we're facing with Looker Studio. And then with Airtable, you can't custom build anything that you want to do. It's very limited. So for example, you can't really get the correct stats for all the underlying numbers within the setting process because they use a different formula system. So we've tried all of it, but this is, by far the best one because you can make exactly whatever formula that you want to make. And then also you don't run into issues where if you're upgrading the system, you have to completely redo the dashboard essentially. So yeah, anything that you want to do. Same with the landing pages, calls booked, conversion rate of the, let's say a VSL, conversion rate from opt-ins, opt-in conversions, everything. And everything, like I said, is in one sheet. We have one dashboard, which is the one I've shown you. We have one input table for sales, one for payment, one for setting, organic, profile ads, landing page. And then we also have a follow-up tracker. This is for the setters. If they have any leads in the DMs or on the phone that they want to follow up with that they didn't book in, they would put them in here so they can keep, they can stay on top of them essentially. But everything is in one place, right? And if you're not using any of these, you would just, remove them essentially. But all the payments are automated. All the sales calls are automated. And then for each call that the closer does, he would go into the sheet and he would update what happened on that call, just like he would do in the CRM. The setting is automated, organic. You can basically automate however much you want to, right? So that is the tracking sheet. And with this in place, you're going to be able to understand everything that goes on in the business. And you can even customize this to whatever else that you wanted to add in, It's really customizable. So whatever you want to track, you can track it. But you have all the stats for sales, all the stats for setting, all the stats for organic, all the stats for ads, all the stats for the landing page, everything in one dashboard. And you can track it by who was the closer, who was the setter, what was the UTM source, everything. The next thing is going to be the CRM, because obviously this is great. You want to track your numbers, but you also need to be able to track all the different stages of the leads, where they're at, who needs to be followed up with, and then also any details about like the payments, any notes on the leads, all that kind of stuff. And then also you obviously want to have a CRM so that you can track, so you can get a phone number, because you want your setters, your closers to call all the leads that are opting in, obviously, and then also be able to have a point of contact where when people are booking in, we take them through a pre-call flow, usually on WhatsApp, where the setter is reaching out to them, they connect them with the closer then sends a personalized selfie video to the lead and just basically goes into a few questions in the discovery before they even jump on the sales call. Because again, you want to make sure that you have really good show rates. You want to make sure that you can track all of this, right? So if you have the closers called from their own phone, you wouldn't be able to see it. But if you get a phone number on close, that is the one that they would use, or you can obviously get multiple different ones, one for the setter, one for the closer, whatever. And then with that number, you can create a WhatsApp account and you can give access to your setter, to your closer. And then this way you don't run into the issue where you're not able to track if the follow-ups are being done or not, right? So getting a phone number, keeping every single stage clean. So this is, for the webinar, you can have multiple different pipelines, one for sales, one for webinar, one for, whatever. And then you're able to see everybody that opted in, you're able to call them, all the calls that are being booked, all the no-shows. And again, this is automated, right? So as people no-show, as people cancel, as people booking calls, they will automatically, repopulate within the CRM. And then again, you have the phone number. So this is pretty simple, but you want to have a CRM in place. You can either use Close or go high level. This is an example from Close. Both work. So yeah, that's the CRM. That's how we stay on top of every single lead in the pipeline. The next one is Discord. And this is basically where we're tying everything together. This is where we are collectively as the entire team communicating day to day, and we're getting all of the automations that are happening in real time sent to us within Discord. So every time somebody books in a call, every time somebody pays, every end of day report, every sales call report, every content report, every onboarding form filled out by new clients, everything goes into Discord. So as you can see over here with an example, we have booked calls. This was from a webinar. We booked a lot of calls on the webinar, but booked calls, we have reschedules, cancellations, no-shows, end of day reports, conversation reviews with the setters. So this is another example from calls being booked. So we have all the different details for the lead that they filled out on the form. We have the setter giving a detailed instruction of what made this guy book, what was his pain, giving that to the closer. Again, making sure that we have as much good communication between the different sections in the business to make sure that the setter can give all the details to the closer, make sure that they both collectively do the pre-call flow with the lead, everything like that. Same with payments. So every time you get a payment, we would have even who was the setter on that payment, the closer, everything. So you're able to attribute very easily. Same with end of day report. So every single day when the setter fills out the end of day report, every time you have a sales call report that you will get your closer to fill out, usually we do that after each individual call. The closer sends a detailed report of what went well, what didn't what go so well, rate your discovery, rate your pitch, rate your objection handling, what was the cash collected, everything again, so we can understand what's going on in real time with every single booked call, every single call that was a no-show or the live call that didn't close, or if they closed, all the different details, the call recording links and everything. And then also with the setters, sending daily conversation reviews, everything is done within Discord. So essentially, what is going to happen here is you have all the numbers to know exactly what's going on at every single point every single day. Basically, you can track this, right? So you can go into looking at last week versus this week, last month versus this month, and you can see everything. Same with the CRM, you have every single lead and you have all the different details about the lead, any notes from the sales team, all that kind of stuff to make sure that you have a very structured approach to how you're following up with leads, everything. And then you have Discord where everybody gets notified every single time somebody or something changes. So every time you get a book call, canceled, payments, everything is very structured for the entire team to be notified and just work as a collective team instead of having very segmented. A lot of times it's very segmented. So the setter and the closer doesn't really speak that well, whatever. But with this system in place, you're able to have a very good way to have everybody communicate, everybody stay on top, and make sure that you can track every single step that is going on. So again, if you want the entire tracking system you see in this video, DM me track on Instagram and I'll help you out. We can set this up for you. We can help you set this up yourself, whatever. And if you want the automations, like a template for the automations, just DM me on IG and I'll send it over to you. But that is essentially it. That is the tracking system we've used to help our clients make over $1 million. And a lot of that can literally be tracked back to the tracking system being good. Because if we didn't have this, we wouldn't know all the different things and we would have definitely not been able to make really, fast decisions and been able to, make the kind of money that we have. So that is it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.